I am a Reynolds Fellow here. I started in August. I arrived here, actually, as you can probably hear, I'm not from around here. I'm from England originally. I am a graphic journalist and have been experimenting this year with immersive journalism, transmedia, and VR storytelling. But needless to say, 9 days after I arrived, Michael Brown was fatally shot. I've got a presentation, so I'm going to move in the interest of time pretty quickly through it, and then I'm going to give you a live demo. So a lot of my work was informed by Colin Gordon. He's done a great deal of work, I guess, building on some of the maps that we've seen already, trying to represent this very complex subject in data viz and infographics. You can see there's a little bit.ly link that I made, links to some of the GIS maps that he's made to try and map decline in St. Louis. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it. It's really fascinating. And in a lot of ways, I feel like the comics and the graphic journalism that I do, I take that as a good sign, builds on that idea of trying to represent a lot of information in a really concise, succinct frame. So when I immediately went down to Ferguson following the shooting, I started interviewing people. This is the sort of the way that I typically work at first. I take these live sketches, and I see it as a way to create that personal connection with people. It can really build trust. It's obviously primarily useful in situations where cameras are either slightly insensitive, or in my previous experience, I'd worked a lot with trafficking victims, and so it was just inappropriate to put recording equipment in front of them. And just by drawing them and by recording their stories, I managed to create a better sense of connection, and you can see here, this is directly from my sketchbook. But what I really wanted to do, and what I was really, I guess at the time, it seemed very obvious that a lot of the coverage was focusing perhaps on the more dramatic events of the evenings, the protests and some of the very polemical photographs that we've already seen. I wanted to tell the story and really dig into the event itself and try and use my visual storytelling skills to bring, in a way, to life the different perspectives. So that's where I created a series of comics, basically building off the transcripts of interviewees who were at the scene, and turned them into, as you can see, about 30 panels long comics. So on the left, you can see here, this is Piaget Crenshaw, who viewed the incidents from her window. Tiffany Mitchell is in the middle, and Dorian Wilson, who was accompanying Michael Brown. That is also a link up there to a mobile optimized website that I made. This sort of builds on what Megan was talking about earlier, trying to use these visuals and make them as mobile and sort of cross-platform functional as possible. So if you go there, it'll actually port 3 panels to a tablet or 1 panel to a phone. And Empathetic Media, which is the consultancy that I sort of set up during my time here at RJI, has been building these sort of things. And it's very happy to work with anyone that's exploring this sort of visual storytelling. Needless to say, I was very interested in representing all sides of the story and the inherently contradictory situation. So this is from Darren Wilson's perspective inside the police car. This was originally published on Fusion in December. There were, it being the first sort of experiment of its kind, there were a lot of cross-platform checks and safeguards that we had to do to ensure browser compatibility, full device functionality. I've learned a great deal having done it. One thing, for example, is it relies on the Unity plugin, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I actually show you what that is. So when I first went down there, this is the shooting, the scene of the shooting. You can see the memorial in the road there. What I did is I basically sketched it out as I would a comics page. And then I used a lot of Google satellite imagery to reference where the buildings were and where the witnesses were standing, respectively. This is the first pass at it that I did, I want to say, around late August. And then this is a more recent version. So this is actually building on the game engine, which is what I've created this scene in. And the thing I want to reassert time and time again that a lot of people, I think, often get confused about is the fact that this is an organic process. So the fact that you're making these interactives, there is never a finishing point, as we've seen with this story. It keeps sort of metastasizing and changing, going in different directions. The technology allows for that. It's as simple as literally adding a build and incorporating more of these different elements. So I'm going to speed up. I use Google SketchUp, which is a freeware app. You can use, again, incorporating satellite imagery to build up the 3D models. The beauty of this being that a lot of all the distances are accurate. You can see here, it gives you that 3D view. I then worked with a team of 3D modelers in much the same way that a video game is sort of essentially built. And I believe fundamentally that the way we're going to look at narrative now is going to change to the idea of, instead of linear chronological, almost like constrained forms, we're going to see stories more like worlds and containers for repositorying information. So this is a screenshot from the scene, and the narrative mechanics that I used to allow users to explore it were multicolored beacons through which the user can walk, and as they walk through, they trigger different forms of content, whether it's the audio testimonies of witnesses or the evidence itself, such as you can see here, the autopsy report. So building on, as we've seen as well, a lot of the augmented location-based examples, this is actually a screenshot from a little Vine that I shot, but we printed out stickers, and these stickers were geotagged so that if you held your phone over using a smartphone app, the comic actually appears inside your smartphone. And my plan was to go to the scene and put these stickers up. Obviously, there were slight legal issues about private property rights and what have you, but I'm confident that it will be easy to replicate this using GPS, invisible GPS markers. So we'll talk more about that after this. So without further ado, this is what the site looks like. The link to it is Ferg. It's another bit.ly link. It's Ferg Ferg desktop is the bit.ly link. Sorry, Ferg desktop. And this is what it looks like on your desktop. So it appears in a sort of frame, and you have, on the left-hand side, you have the checklists of the different eyewitnesses. On the right-hand side, you have a UI map that allows you to see where you are in relation to the different beacons. And then you have a series of breadcrumbs that move you through each of the beacons. As you cross one beacon, it activates the comic, which pulls down, you scroll down, and you can click left and right through to read the comic. So it was a little bit of a workaround using the web player, but I'm pleased to announce that we have a live version here. This debuted at the True False Film Festival, where I'd like to request a plucky volunteer. Jim, do you want to? Can I co-opt you?
Last time I did that, you know what happened.
That's true. Well, as long as you just don't puke, we'll be fine. Okay. So.
Here we go. I'm going in.
Oh, you know what? Wait, before don't go in just yet. Okay.
Somebody take a picture of Jim.
You have just arrived at the Canfield Grain Apartments complex in Ferguson, Missouri, soon after Michael Brown was fatally shot by police officer Darren Wilson. Your goal is to explore the environment by walking into 3 different kinds of beacons. Colored beacons will display comics of the eyewitness testimonies that were broadcast by the media immediately after the shooting. White beacons will display photos of the evidence gathered by forensic investigators, and black beacons will play audio of the eyewitness statements made during the grand jury trial. The colored beacons are linked together chronologically by arrows and must be visited in the fixed order displayed. The black and white beacons can be visited at any time. Use the cursor keys on the keyboard in front of you to move, and the mouse to change where you look, in addition to your natural head movements. To sprint, hold down the shift and cursor keys. To move to the next page of a comic, click the right mouse button. To go back a page, click the left mouse button. All of the geographic locations are based on research and data gathered at the scene, though in some cases, witness beacons have been approximated. You have a maximum of 15 minutes to conduct your investigation.
Okay, so you can see Jim's moved into the Dorian Johnson beacon, and he's reading Dorian's, the comic that is directly taken from Dorian's testimony. You can right-click to move through that comic, like so. We are, like I said, it's all about iteration and learning from your mistakes. So the next build is going to incorporate the gamepad, so there won't be any of this removing the headset issue. Like I said, this has been a learning process. And if you move away from that, Jim, if you turn around, you can look. So where you look will determine where you go. And so the Oculus, this is a DK2 headset, right? So the next one, I believe, will be wireless, although don't quote me on that. You'll have to ask Mark Zuckerberg. So if you follow the green arrows. So this is all based on user testing. So if you, and now look left a bit. So originally, I hadn't intended to have any structure. It was completely open sandbox. What was interesting about that is that users actually felt overwhelmed by the amount of choice and were time and time again asking for direction. So in a lot of ways, our role as storytellers is to curate a sort of a narrative whereby the mechanics drive story, that doesn't make readers feel that they're being forced on rails. So if you keep walking forward, you'll see, for example, if you go over that black thing, that's a sandal from where it was in the scene, and that's the photo from the grand jury FOIA request. Similarly, you've been through, you can continue to do that, or you can, if you turn to your left now, Jim, and look, sorry, this is a little confusing. Let's think. Try and aim for a white beacon. I believe there's one. Keep turning. To your left now. There you go. Walk towards that. So, yeah, nice one. You might have to walk. Yeah, there you go. Keep going. You did. You walked into the...
Okay, as I turned into Canfield, actually sees some confusion going on between the officer and Mr. Brown, which...
So this is a direct transcription of the grand jury testimony.
Sitting out wondering what was going on. I seen they
them.
had Mr. Brown from inside his vehicle by the neck and
there are over a dozen of these white beacons all scattered around the environment where they based on where they were standing.
And before I knew it, the officer had held on to Mr. Brown. He had put his firearm and shot Mr. Brown. That was the first shot. Mr. Brown get loose. That's when he runs approximately about 10, 15 feet. He gets loose from the officer after the first shot. The officer fired more shots from his vehicle.
And so the next thing that I'm going to be doing...
Every day they have that little memorial.
The next thing that I'm going to be doing is adding 3D models to show exactly where in the scene people were standing, so that you can get a sense of how far away. In a way, it's sort of like a forensic reconstruction of the sort of events. And as you go through the different beacons, obviously they inherently say contradictory things, and so it's much more part of the audience's experience to work out for themselves what happened.
That was the first shot. Mr. Brown get loose. That's when he runs approximately about 10, 15 feet. He gets loose from the officer after the first shot. The officer fired more shots from his vehicle. Every day they have that little memorial. They're talking. So I've been seeing this constantly every day. The candlelight vigil they had Sunday.
I'm going to walk
I believe
through
there may have
a
been
little
1,000
bit
people
just
on the
to give
street.
you a sense, but that is the nuts and bolts of it. And basically what we do is we follow the different arrows through. So I mentioned Piaget Crenshaw, so now we're going to go up into her apartment. I found the blueprint, the floor layout for her apartment online, and was able to reconstruct her apartment using that. And so you can see I can now move forward and read her testimony. And there's other media in here as well, so I can... I can walk through. I actually have the audio from the Glide phone recording that was incorporated in here. And so really all it is, as I mentioned, it's that idea of building a world and allowing people to experience it truly immersively. And yeah, I'll stop after this little beacon here. So this is for those of you that haven't heard it, this is the Glide audio, so you can read, hopefully you can see that.
You are pretty. You're so fine. Just going over some of your videos. How could I forget?
So, as we know, that was the recording that was made by the, one of the residents who was doing a video chat, using the Glide platform. By putting all this together in the scene, I believe it truly creates a visceral connection to the story that is hard to achieve using other media. So, thanks.